Hi. It's great. Once again, my name is Simeon, and I'm here to talk about fashion in Iowa. As Rachel mentioned, yes, you heard that correctly, fashion in Iowa. No, I'm not crazy. Give me some time, I'll explain. But there are a group of us in Iowa. We're calling ourselves the Iowa Fashion Project, and we hope that we're working on something that can not only be transformative for the state of Iowa, but change the fashion industry throughout the country and possibly have a global impact as well. But a bit about me first. The interesting thing is, I'm not originally from Iowa. I came to Iowa from Ohio to work on the Obama campaign in 2008. I was one of the first field organizers during the Iowa caucus, and I followed the campaign all the way through the primary to the general, going to states all across the country, and ended up in Washington, D.C., working on the transition team and staying for the inauguration. After all of that, I came back to Iowa to finish my degree. But to be perfectly honest with all of you, I never thought I would stay. I never thought it would be my final destination point. I, like many of you, like many people across the country, didn't really appreciate that Iowa had a cool and creative community, economy, that there were entrepreneurs doing things. My understanding of the state was very surface level, but I would soon be proved wrong. So back to Iowa fashion. This article here is an article in The Onion, kind of satirizing Iowa Fashion Week. It's funny, I know, it's really, really funny. It gets thousands of retweets and likes and comments every single time it's pushed out during Fashion Week. This woman probably has bedazzled jeans on. It says that Iowa is fashion backwards, that the fashion and design talent is lacking, it's non-existent in Iowa. Or the perception of Iowa is corn, it's rural, it's agricultural, that there's corn as far and as wide as the eye can see. But what you don't see pictures like this. This is not LA, this is not New York, this isn't some European fashion capital. This is Ames, Iowa. Population 20,000 people soaking wet. This is their student-produced fashion show. Every single year they produce a fashion show, and it's considered the best student-run, student-designed fashion show of the entire country. Iowa State University has a really cool fashion and design program that is ranked one of the top 10 fashion programs in the entire country. It's a top 20 program in the entire world. A top 20 fashion and design program in Ames, Iowa. Or you don't hear about Todd Snyder, an Iowa-born, bred, and raised designer who just sold his line to American Eagle for an ungodly amount of money. You don't hear about Bedowers, a menswear boutique that's been there for 20 years in Des Moines. GQ recently rated the store a top 5 men's boutique in the entire country. You don't see images like this. This is a fashion show that we produced for Matthew Christopher. Matthew Christopher is another Iowa-born, bred, raised designer. He lives in New York City right now, but he actually manufactures bridal couture gowns in Iowa and ships them all across the world. So what's the problem here? Why is there this massive disconnect between the perception and the reality? Well, there's a lack of community. All those efforts that I described are looked at in isolation. No one's connecting the dots. There's not a way for people that are wanting to design and wanting to build brands in Iowa to plug into a community that's there to support them. There's this push and this pull to move to places like New York or San Francisco or maybe even Chicago, and no one's telling the story. No one's telling a compelling, coherent story about fashion in Iowa for the world to see. But the biggest problem, and the one that we're out to solve, is that there's no community. Creating an isolation is awfully depressing. Oftentimes people give up, and they don't recognize they're part of a larger fabric of a community. And there's no way, there's no community, there's no entity, there's no organization for people to plug in. If I want to be a part of a fashion community, if I'm looking for help, where do I go? Who can help me? Oftentimes you just give up. And we came about this Iowa Fashion Project thing, this fashion community building effort, by accident. We produced a fashion show at EntreFest, which is a yearly conference for entrepreneurs, for small business owners. Gets about 1,000 people each year and growing. And last year, we wanted to use the conference, the event, as a platform to showcase this fashion thing, this emerging fashion community. But it wasn't a conventional fashion show that's about one designer or one brand that you're there to see. It was a collaboration. It was a combined effort of designers, of independent brands, of boutiques, of stylists, of photographers, of creatives, saying, hey, let's all band together, let's collaborate, and showcase this community using this event. And that fashion show was a huge success. We had 400 plus people show up. After the show, people were demanding when our next fashion show was going to be, when's the next fashion event happening, how do I plug in? I really like what you guys are doing, the energy and the excitement. There's great momentum at that event, what you guys are doing, what's next? And it caused us to take a step back and think about how do we take that moment, how do we take that momentum and turn it into a movement? So we created the Iowa Fashion Project, and we had a launch party, and the first event was a test. We wanted to test, would people show up? Would a fashion community show up? Would designers and brands and people looking to plug in, or people who had ideas, and they wanted to figure out how to make that happen, would they show up to an event? Is there a consumer community out there who want to support local designers and manufacturers and boutiques? Will they show up to an Iowa Fashion Project launch event? And as this picture suggests, they did, and it was a success. But to be perfectly honest with all of you, we got some things wrong initially. Rather naively, we thought that we were going to do this thing, we were going to announce that we're here, and the skies would open up. The heavens would bequeath themselves to us, and we would get lots of funding, and we would be able to partner with large institutions and organizations because fashion in Iowa was cool, it was creative, it was sexy. How could you not want to be a part of this? Well, needless to say, that's not how things went down. But what we did find is that if we focused on community building, if we focused on providing a platform and an entry point for people to plug in, and if we kept doing events, if we had fashion shows and fashion mixers, and if we did that collaboratively, we could build our brand. Everything would take care of itself. And all of that work over the course of the year really culminated in Iowa's first fashion festival, Flyover Fashion Fest. Iowa, among many in the Midwest, is considered a flyover state, so we decided just to own it. Let's Flyover Fashion Fest, let's do it. Let's make it cool, let's make it big, and let's just keep this thing going. So the festival was really part Fashion Week. We had 4 fashion shows over the course of 2 days. It was part conference. We had panels and exhibitions and workshops and presentations, explaining how people can build their brand, connecting designers, and so forth. And it was part music festival. Every single night, we had a really cool music performance, and people could dance the night away. So what we've learned over the course of about a year or so is that we're really onto something, that this fashion thing is legit. There's this community out there, and if we focused on building community, if we focus on providing a way for people to plug in, an entry point, that we can be successful. And that initial assumption, that basic insight, that talent exists in Iowa, it just needs a home, and that if we market, if we promote, if we become an advocate for what's really possible in Iowa, then we'll be okay. So, why should, some of you may be still cynical, like, why should I care? This fashion thing is cool. Simeon, nice speech, pat on the back, okay. First of all, fashion's big business. It can create jobs. It can stimulate and be the focal point of a creative economy. But there's a larger point here. We've long accepted that Silicon Valley doesn't have a monopoly on ideas or talent. That you don't have to live in Silicon Valley or Boston or New York to start a company. Why can't that same principle apply to fashion? And ultimately, big picture, if we're successful transforming the perception of what's possible, creating this fashion community and building it up, it really makes a point about what's possible in the state. That regardless of your idea, of your creative ambition, that there's a home for you in Iowa, that you don't have to go elsewhere. And that's what it's all about. And I suspect, in fact, I know, that if we can do this in Iowa, you all can do the same thing as well here in Redding. In fact, it seems like you already are. Thank you very much.